Hello, BookTube. I have a special video here today about Montague Rhodes James, who lived from 1862 to 1936. He was a medievalist scholar. He became Vice Chancellor of Cambridge and Director of the Fitzwilliam Museum, but he's better known as M.R. James Ghostwriter. Not ghostwriter in the sense of writing for other people, but writing about ghosts. And I have a special guest here, Dr. Jane Mainley-Piddock, who is an expert in M.R. James and is currently or has currently finished a collection of his letters. And tell me something about yourself and how you began with M.R. James, and that's taken you down this path to where you are
Okay.
today.
I think the first time I ever heard of M.R. James might surprise you. I was actually doing a night class at Glasgow University for a master's. And the person who was actually doing the class, Dr. Richard Dover, decided near Halloween to start reading out some of James's stories. And as the famous saying goes, a light bulb moment. Light bulb went on in my mind, and I thought, oh my God, this is such an interesting author. And I'd never heard of him. I'd never seen any of the BBC specials that they used to have when I was younger. Never heard of him at all. So I started reading the ghost stories, and I thought, oh, this is really interesting. So we had to write an essay of 10,000 words for each part of the module that we were doing. And I said to Dr. Richard Dover, I said, oh, I'd love to write an essay on him. And Richard looked at me, and he's such a really, really funny fella. He looked at me and he said, don't bother. There's nothing on James to help you write an essay. So as a student, you suddenly realize that, as my supervisor at Aberystwyth said, Dr. Tasha Alden, she said, that's the golden ticket for a PhD. So I started down the journey.
Well, I remember we sort of connected quite a while ago through Twitter, and I had heard of M.R. James quite a while ago, and I read some of his stories maybe 30 years ago when I was early 20s. It never really they never really made an impression on me. But then speaking to you and sort of starting to follow your journey into your PhD, uh, I go, I'm gonna look at him again. And
Good.
it was a revelation. So it's been about 10 years, and oh, this is gonna be noisy here at times. But yeah, every other year I try to read through his ghost stories again because I love them so much. And currently, for the last couple of times, I've been reading the Penguin Classics, 2 volumes, edited by S.T. Joshi. And it's quite interesting because in his introduction, he talks about this cache of letters that
Yeah.
James, that's at the Cambridge University in the
Yeah.
archives. And he says nobody really has dipped into these
No.
until now.
Yeah, that's another long sort of journey. I
But
was
we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a minute, actually.
okay.
Yeah, because what I want to do is talk a little bit before we get to the letters. But I is a few things that I reading and rereading of James, and a few things that Joshi says in his introduction. I wanted to discuss about the sort of the contents and the context of the stories, and one of them was like where he uses sort of like the primitive and primeval aspects of folklore, in that it seems to be in the creation almost of the ghosts, and some of them aren't actually ghosts as we think of them either. Or am
No.
I misinterpreting this?
No, you've picked up something that I really enjoyed doing for my PhD. James's ghosts, if you look at them, they're not the Shakespearean ghost. They're not the shade of somebody that floats harmoniously into the picture. A white spectre. They're not the ghosts of the Romantic era. They are more, I'd say, a very Victorian invention in that we definitely discern what people call the Victorian Darwinian Gothic. Now, I wrote a chapter of this in my PhD, which I'm trying to get published, but again, trying to get anything published at the moment. Unless you're a celebrity, you won't get anything published. I mean, I've been very lucky with the letters. But I wrote a whole chapter on the way that if you look at James's ghosts, and the poster child for this would be Count Magnus's helper. If you look at Count Magnus's helper, he has all the attributes of Darwin's devolved specimens. For instance, when Darwin did his thesis, he talked about how man had progressed from what he called a walking fish, and how, there was the attributes of fins, tails, protuberances, the things that you wouldn't associate with man. So if you look at books by people such as Mary Melville Evans and the Darwinian Gothic, you'll find this whole strain. And it was also picked up by scholars such as Nodau and people like that. And they wrote about regression of man. And I'd say that James very much picked up on this. I mean, he doesn't refer to having ever read Darwin, but if you look at his ghosts, then all the strains of Darwinism are in these ghosts. So it's a very, very interesting aspect. And I mean, that's the reason I was trying to get my PhD thesis published, because all the aspects I think that the readers of the ghost stories would love are in my PhD thesis, and especially the strain of Victorian Darwinian Gothicism. If that makes sense at all.
Yeah, no, it does. It really puts it in context, actually. And the other thing is that until your PhD thesis, has there been any other study of all the ghost stories as a whole, or is yours pretty well the first?
There's Patrick Murphy's study on James's ghost stories, but Patrick's more interested in the medieval aspects, whereas I've gone into his ghost stories and taken the strains of the era in which James lived. And also I've come across something which I refer to as the Doppler effect, whereby if you see a leaf on a pond, it gives out consecutive rings.
Yeah.
And it's like a Doppler effect in that you cannot separate James and the era in which he lived from his ghost stories, because he is very much, as he said in one of his stories, I'm very much Victorian by birth. And if you look into James's stories, it's what I refer to in my PhD thesis as the bridge from the Victorian to the modern, because he started out a Victorian, but if you look at his stories, he's got so many lived aspects. We see the first of them where they've got the Victorian aspect. Then we can definitely pick out a strain into Edwardianism. And later on, and this may surprise you, I mean, it's very, very difficult to explain, but you will find the T.S. Eliot's, the poem, The Wasteland.
Yeah.
You'll see an aspect of modernism in his later stories. And you'll find him that he's a definite Gothicist modernist. And again, I wish I could get somebody to publish my damn PhD thesis, because I know that I was so interested studying all of this, finding all these aspects. And I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, people will be so interested to hear about this. So yeah, it was an absolute privilege to spend the time on a PhD on James and his stories.
You also brought in sort of Freudian, and was
Oh yeah.
Jung as well, looking at archetypes as well.
Yes.
I remember some tweets, and I didn't realize about this part of it, because I don't remember. Well, I haven't seen every tweet you've done, but I don't remember you talking about that. But I remember talking about the Freudian aspect, and that
Oh
really
yeah.
intrigued me because of the archetypes and everything.
Yeah.
And like I know, we don't have 20 hours to talk here, but if you could sort of, encapsulate that, the
Yeah.
archetype, going back to the primitivism, and I think that's all related as well.
Yeah. I mean, with the Freudian aspect, there's one unfortunate aspect I'd say about James, that any new student coming to James, and this is the only criticism I'd say, or if I was ever given the chance to supervise a student, which I can now being a doctor, if I was given the chance to supervise a student who was starting out, I'd say to them, please don't take the default position of approaching James through Freud, because that is the rookie mistake. Sorry, I can get very American. I've spent a lot of time there. That is the rookie mistake you make. Please do not approach James through Freud. Because people immediately, they'll look at James, they'll look at Freud, and they will go straight, like they say in Britain, like a ferret up a drain pipe. They'll go straight away for James's sexuality. And please don't do that, because you will bore people. If you make the mistake of going straight through for James's sexuality, and the story that everybody straight away goes for is a whistle and I'll come to you, my lad.
Yeah.
Straight away. And we've got, oh my God, James was a repressed homosexual. Oh my God, straight away, pearl clutching auntie, James was a homosexual. And not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Mm.
From what I would read about James is that nowadays we've got a possible bisexual, and we've also got a possible complete asexual, in that there is nothing there. You really do have to dig deep to accuse James of any of this, I'm afraid. He does not belong in any camp. He's far, far more complicated a person than that, really.
Well, you just look at the amount of stuff he did. You don't
Yeah.
have time for other things. for one, just
I
a
mean,
answer to that.
the one thing that I absolutely loved, and I will tell this anecdote until the day I die because I loved it. James went 4 times, perhaps even more, to watch Peter Pan in the West End with his friend Prothero. And suddenly James sat up. Basically, the popcorn bucket went over the head. He sat up. I call it the popcorn bucket over the head. Have we ever had that in a film when we just go, whoa, chuck the popcorn bucket, because it's that brilliant? He just had a popcorn brilliant moment, because he said to Prothero, oh, the woman playing Peter Pan, I'm in love. I want to propose to the woman playing Peter Pan. Can we take 5 minutes to unpack that? We've got a cross-dressing woman playing a boy in Peter Pan, and
Yeah.
James said, I want that person for my wife. We can't even say there that we've got the Victorian cult of Alice and the little girl, because you've got a very strong, boyish, cross-dressing woman playing Peter Pan. Okay, scholars, unpack that one. An essay, please. 2,000 words.
Only 2,000 words.
You could do a whole damn PhD on that one. It's lovely.
What about Jung then? Jungianism. Like, is there more that you could dig out of there with the archetypes and the dream type aspect?
Oh, My God, as you say, Sean, do we have 20 hours? No.
Yeah.
If you want to get an inclination about Jung, again, going back to the fact that I did a whole chapter of my PhD thesis on this, and I'd love people to be able to read it. But if you start off by looking at Jungian psychology, we have the whole layers of the self, the shadow, all of the aspects of the persona and the ego. And you see, Jung approached the psyche in a totally different way to his old mentor, Freud. So I actually approach it not just through the archetypes, because again, that's the rookie mistake that a lot of people who approach anything with Jung do. We have the archetypes, but we also have the varying different theories of the self. And if you look at the villains, the ghosts in an R.James story, then you have the shadow aspect. Now, the Victorians are very, very famous for approaching things as black and white, as the evangelical church had it then, that you couldn't have sin, you couldn't have sex. They even covered up the piano legs, for God's sake. So they're trying to make everybody whiter than white. And you will find novels in the Victorian era, such as The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. You'll have Jekyll and Hyde, Robert Louis Stevenson. You have The Island of Dr. Moreau. You have H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. All of these have a character who is exposing various aspects of black and white. And you'll also find this with the aspect of the shadow. Because in every person, Jung said, we have to get used to the darker aspects. And we all have it. We have the dark aspect, we have the light aspect. And Jung called this the shadow aspect. Jung said, it is very, very detrimental to your psyche to try and get rid of the shadow aspect. And I mean, who loves it more? You know, when you look at an American church and you suddenly find that the pastor has run off with a little girl, or he's done something stupid, or he's thieved, or there's so many evangelical pastors who've fallen from sin, and then he'll ask his congregation on Sunday, please God forgive me. He's not getting in touch with his shadow aspect, people. He's not. He's trying to put the shadow aspect, as Dorian Gray did, in a picture and stick it in his attic. It's not going to work. And you will find this in every one of James's stories. You'll find the trouble starts when the academic tries to not acknowledge his shadow aspect, which brings forth the ghost.
The full act, the full evil aspect. And then he's got to expunge it at the end, or try to, and then pretend, that it's
doesn't exist.
Evil, they're separate things, and you lock one away and you keep the light. Yeah, okay, I see that.
Yeah, I mean, one of a really, really good one here is The Treasure of Abbot Thomas. Now, when Abbot Thomas is down the archetypal well, not Abbot Thomas, sorry, the academic is down the well.
Oh yeah. That's I can't remember which story it is now, but I know
the Treasure of Abbot Thomas.
Yeah.
And then suddenly he feels this thing drop into his chest, and he's alone there in the dark with this thing that has dropped onto his chest. Now, if you read Jung, that is a metaphor for being confronted with your shadow.
Okay.
It's a metaphor. So the guy in the well, and I'm like you, Sean. Suddenly it's gone out of my head. Suddenly he's screaming his head off. He's thrown off the monster. He's trying to get his valet Brown to take him back up the well. Please God, help me, help me, help me. He is not encountering and coming to terms with his shadow aspect. So if you approach James's ghost stories through Jung, you will find the Victorian shadow aspect again, coming back to Victorianism.
Wow. Yeah, no, I could see all that, because that's where, like that, like I've read a little bit of Freud and Jung. I've always liked Jung better for the dream aspects and that kind of thing. And I always thought somehow in the back of my mind that Jung would fit better for James, but I never
Yeah.
knew exactly how or why. But you
I
said it.
mean, yeah, I mean, if you decide that you are really going to go for the Freudian aspect, oh God, please don't use sexuality. You're just going to bore everybody. Go for the unheimlich. Go for the uncanny.
Yeah.
And where to start? Look up the book by Nicholas Royal called The Uncanny, and it will tell you how to approach any ghost story, not just James. I mean, we've got, the uncanny, when you find yourself in a moonlit road at night, and suddenly your brain starts making every tree a monster. Everything that rustles behind you is a monster. And you'll look at a doll and you'll think, oh my God, the doll's alive. Or if you're in a stately home and the eyes are following you in the portraits, that's the sense of the unheimlich.
I'm going to have to look that up, because I'm familiar. I have heard of the book, and I'm definitely going to do it. Now, the other thing is, and I think follows on with this, that because you're saying he was Victorian, but then he sort of moves to modernism, and he's writing sort of what he knows as well, because a lot or most of the characters are academics, and they're cloistered academics. He was a cloistered academic in a sense.
Yeah,
So,
to a certain extent, I'd say. I mean, there's still a lot more work to do in those aspects.
yeah, but then how, like, all this sort of feeds into, I think, the stories, and then that brings up like a lot of stuff that, because he's done this, whether consciously or subconsciously, it brings up a lot of criticism, because there's no women in his stories. So that, like, I've seen a lot of criticism, and it's like,
did they read all of the stories?
Yes, that's the thing. That's the thing, because he does have this aspect in, and it's not just. That's why I say, like, he most of the characters are cloistered, and he was sort of a cloistered character, but there's other aspects, and are those other aspects his aspects of him that's coming out in the stories, or is he
right? Okay. Come in again. I know I'm banging on about this, so please forgive me. But my PhD thesis, again, I did a whole area of explaining how James has two definite types of people, and they're almost archetypes. You've got the strong woman, and he does have a lot of strong women. I mean, for instance, the Rose Garden. We've got Mrs. Anstruther.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we've got Mr. Humphreys on his inheritance. We've got Lady Wardrobe. And then we've got the residents at Whitminster, for instance. These are just three instances that I'm coming up with here.
Yeah.
And these people aren't exactly minor characters. I mean, for instance, James revels in giving these women strong parts. For instance, in The Residence at Whitminster, Mary, you see the entire part of the story through her eyes. She even gets her own part in it. And then Lady Wardrobe is one of the characters that actually gets the investigation of the maze, the titular maze in the story. So we've got the slightly effeminate male like Parkins in Oh Come a Whistle, and then we've got the strong women. And you have to ask yourself, to be fair, I am not saying that James was a feminist. I mean, he wasn't a feminist, but at the same time, he was more willing to give women their humanity. than a lot of male Victorian writers and academics were. And for instance, the academic Jane Harrison, he picked a really big argument with Harrison, but it wasn't of the fact that he detested the fact she was female.
Mm.
He didn't like her theories, and he was arguing with her on a theoretical level. Okay, he said, I dipped my pen in gall and flayed her. But it was more an academical thing. It was not anything to do with the fact that he detested her for her sex.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said that, because that's why I say, but you do see a lot of criticism for those reasons. And then when I read the stuff, I didn't think so. I'm glad you said.
No, I mean, you get the people don't realize that research is a long process, and it's not straight away. You do not arrive like making a cake. You do not arrive at a fully baked cake straight away without making a few mistakes. I mean, for instance, when I was criticized by another I was criticized by another person who likes James. I won't say who the name was, but when I was looking at the letters, when I started the letters, there is in Victorian families a tradition of naming people after one person. So we've got two Montys and we got two Montague Jameses. And when I went to the stack of letters, I didn't know there was two Montague Jameses because I'd never looked at the historical aspect of the family. And I made a rookie mistake of thinking one of the letters was from James. And it was when this James, who turned out to be Uncle Monty, the uncle of M.R. James, was in a camp in Rangoon. So I got really, really excited. And like a character out of some farce, raced off and went, "Oh, look, I've got this letter from Rangoon," and it was written by James. And another academic said to me, "Actually, Jane, no, that's Uncle Monty. He's the uncle of M.R. James." But this other person who likes James decided to drag me through the mud, saying, "Oh, she's an idiot. She doesn't know what she's talking about." Well, I do. I just had to have somebody point out to me that actually it's a Victorian family. This is the uncle of Monty. But since then, I've been through the letters with a fine tooth comb, and every letter I've got is from Montague Rhodes James, the academic, ghostwriter, and scholar. But that's my point. Please do not approach James and immediately jump to conclusions, because you'll make the same mistake that I did.
Well, that's the thing, and I think a lot of people read one or two stories that don't have a female character in, and then jump to the conclusion, and that's and then they don't look into deeper aspects of things as well. But anyway, that's a whole other.
No, and the thing is, it's like when I say to come into research, it's like I'm not afraid to put my hand up and say, I've made a Burke of myself there. And when you're approaching research, don't be afraid to make mistakes, because it's part of the fun.
Yeah. And then before, like, I'm getting close to the letters, but one other aspect of his use of manuscripts in story. Because he was an expert in manuscripts. Now I notice especially thankful with the notes of S.T. Joshi, he points out that this was a real manuscript, or proposed or thought of to be real. But then there's times that James just makes up a manuscript. Now, is it as easy as an explanation as there is no manuscript that fits for the plot of the story, so he just makes it up? Or is there something a little more deeper than that?
I'd say the one thing about James that people really do not realize is that the guy had an absolutely brilliant sense of humor. you'll see in a lot of his stories, you'll look at it and you'll think, is that his humor? And that's one thing I hate about a lot of people. They'll approach James completely po-faced. And, this guy he absolutely adored playing pranks. He loved, I think he'd love Jackass nowadays. He loved, yeah, he absolutely loved doing stupid things like playing the piano and singing in a high falsetto voice. He loved stupid jokes, playing jokes on his friends. He even called one of his friends, poor old Anstey Guthrie, a pig in truffles. He loved that. And the thing is with James, he was such an expert on manuscripts that he would find it quite funny. Like, for instance, oh God, who you're talking about names then just going out of your head?
Yeah.
The guy who wrote Ulysses, the Irish scholar. The one who wrote Ulysses.
James Joyce.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When James Joyce said, right, I've written this book and the ruddy professors are going to have decades trying to sort out what is real and what I've made up. And he delighted in it. Well, M.R. James is the same. He was such an expert. He liked taking medieval manuscripts, making his own up, or actually using real ones. And I think it was just a sense of devilment. It was a sense of, okay, you try and work that one out then. And it was also, we've got to remember that the stories were designed to be read out loud to his friends. So you've got to remember that he never intended publication really of the stories. They were meant to be read out to his friends at Christmas usually. And we've got to remember that these medieval manuscript inclusions were in-jokes. Where a mechanic might say to his friends, "Oh, I've taken the long stand and put it up the Uber pipe," and people will be looking at him going, "What?" And he won't realize that there's no something as a long stand and there's nothing like an Uber pipe. So James would make things up as in-jokes, and we're getting a privileged inclusion in a very privileged amount of a group of people's in-jokes.
It sort of reminds me, but on a smaller scale, or in this case, a larger scale, Umberto Eco, referring to very obscure things, and again, making people think, but also, I'm not an expert in his stuff, but I've read a few things of saying that he puts some in joke, like they're in jokes, but there's not that many people that can get the joke.
No,
and that's part of the joke as well, I think.
Yeah, it's another sort of pet hate of mine that there is so very little investment nowadays into research in this country. It's because James was an expert in paleography. And now we don't have any schools of paleography in this country because Cambridge has got rid of its last one.
Oh, have they? Oh, okay.
And the humanities in this country are being decimated. But again, I'm not going down that route because it just gets me mad, it gets me angry, it gets me depressed. And you'll watch my head spin round and, the soup will come out. So you don't want to see that right now.
Okay. Well, then we'll go on to the letters. Okay. Now, what sort of I guess condition, in the sense, is the letter collection? Is it fairly complete, or is it haphazard? And is it only letter? But you said there's a few from his uncle. Are there other ones in there? Are there sort of letters that have been written to him, or is it just his letters?
Well, first of all, you've got to remember that the letters aren't in a complete collection. We've got some in the British Museum. We've got some in the Fitzwilliam Museum. We've got some in King's in Cambridge, because you've got to remember there isn't one Cambridge college.
Yeah.
There are very many Cambridge colleges spread out across Cambridge. And most of them are housed in the Cambridge Central, what we would call the Cambridge Central Library, but they just call the Cambridge Library. The biggest collection are there, but then there's a lot in the Fitzwilliam. So I had to find out exactly who had which collection, where they were, who curated the collection. So, I mean, a heck of a lot of work went into finding out where they were, who curated them, who I needed to approach. And, you know, that's the difficult part of it. And again, you know, I thought to myself, well, it was again when I was doing my PhD, I thought to myself, I needed access to letters. So you'd think to yourself that there was a published collection of them. Because my friend who was doing a PhD on Oscar Wilde said to me, oh, she said, I've just been reading, you know, Oscar's Wilde's letters. And I'm like, oh, great. So they're in the library. She said, yeah, there's a book. So I thought, okay, well, I need a book of James's letters. So there's me, trotted off to the university library. No book of James's letters. Richard Dover was right. There's nothing on this guy. Nothing. So, I mean, most of the stuff I found on James for my PhD, I had to find out from the internet. I don't think if the internet hadn't been invented that I could have done this PhD. That's how dire the research was when I began my PhD. It's improved a bit since. But I found out who curated the letters and I approached them. And I don't think, to be fair, I would have had confidence to do that if I hadn't been a doctor. Because everybody will tell you that Britain is a very classist state. It's very, very class ridden. It's the very, very, very last of our taboos. And coming from a pretty working class background, I have such bad imposter syndrome that I actually stood shaking on the steps of the Cambridge University Library for a good half an hour before I had the courage to actually walk in. I felt like Dobby the household elf in Harry Potter. I actually had to stand there and say in a very sort of, hello, I'm Jane. I'm Dr. Jane Mainley-Piddock. And I actually stood in the loo saying that for about 2 minutes before I walked in. So can you imagine the normal person in the street plucking up the courage to go to the Cambridge Library and try to view James's letters? If they were able to do that, you're a better person than me.
I have tried doing, not with James's letters, but I've tried to look at some archives at times. And the first question is basically, what are your credentials?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I know. And I walked in and I got through the whole COVID thing because everybody was standing there, you know, gloved up and, you know, masks. And I stood there in my Anthony Bourdain sort of leather jacket and, you know, jeans. And I thought to myself, okay, what would Anthony do? So I went in and I'm like, I'm Dr. Jane Mainley-Piddock. I'm here to see the letters, you know, after spending 5 minutes crying in the loos. And then went in and there they were. They're all sitting there in these boxes with these burgundy folders tied up with legal string. And then there are piles of them. And I thought to myself, I had the only money I had to be able to do this because I had to take a train to Cambridge, stay overnight, get taxis. And the only way I was able to do it, because I'm not a tenured academic, I don't have a research fund, I have very little money. So I had to do a GoFundMe to beg people to pay a fund for me to be able to go down to Cambridge and research the letters. That's how pathetic the state of funding is in this country. And when I got down to Cambridge and I got my hotel, do you know how much I had to feed myself for 2 days while I was in Cambridge? I had £10.
Oh, jeez, yeah.
So I had to go to McDonald's. And then I'm trying to get past all the Tristrams and the Sophies in Cambridge, you know, to just be able to feed myself, to get to the library. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I have one day to get all the letters. No, I kid you not, Sean. I had one day to photograph all the letters I needed to do the damn book.
Wow.
Yeah. And other people, other academics are funded to do this sort of thing. So I've instead of getting bitter about it, I've had to learn to laugh at this.
I can sort of see a supplementary dedication in the letters book. Thank you, McDonald's, for helping make this possible, or something like that.
Oh yes, thank you, McDonald's, for your double sausage and egg McMuffin with hash browns and an orange juice, because that was the only fuel I had to do all the letters in one day.
Let that pass.
That's a McDonald's delivery.
Yeah. Now, like, there's several questions I want now that I have for regarding the letters, the specific letters, before we get to sort of your collection of it. On your Twitter, you occasionally showed pictures because James liked to doodle.
Oh yeah.
Now, were these monsters and things like this, were they things of his imagination, or are they just jokey stuff again, as you were talking about, or are they actually things that he had seen in other manuscripts and he just sort of, copied them from memory, in a sense?
Well, we've got the youthful James at Temple Grove, and his tutor said, there's a very quote that I used in my PhD, that James liked to dredge the depths of refuse, as his tutor said. James would love to find anything in the medieval manuscripts that mentioned the martyrdoms of saints. I mean, for instance, if you look at any medieval manuscript, you'll find all these little heads and these funny creatures that you think, what is that? And I think that James was so delighted, youthful James was so delighted by these medieval manuscript drawings, that he always had the habit later on of doing his own doodles. Because being a medievalist, I mean, if you look on Twitter, you'll find that many accounts that love taking the mickey out of medieval manuscripts. And we have things like walking snakes, little heads, bums doing farts, you know.
Trumpets is one of my favorites.
Yeah, and he loved doing that. And I mean, for instance, he'd also love making little poems up to terrify his sister Grace about dead men rearing up out of the mere and all these things. And it all comes down to James's marvelous sense of humor, I'd say.
Cool. And we'll, we'll start occasionally talk about your collection. Will any of these appear in the book as illustrations?
I'd like that, but I don't think Unbounders have gone for that. They haven't gone for illustrated. I think they've just stuck to the letters themselves, because a lot of people were saying, you know, how come you had an October date to publish the letters and suddenly it's gone to February? Now, the reason that happened is that we've got a bunch of letters written in the 19th century into the early 20th. And it's a lot harder than you might think to be able to homogenize and standardize letters that were written to different people over different years in different collections. For instance, each of the letters had a different heading, because I'm trying to show the people that might want to follow up on my letters, you know, the students that come after me, the researchers that come after me, that if they decide that they want to look up a certain letter, I had to put where this collection, the letter came from, was housed. Some are from the Fitzwilliams, some are from King's College, some are from the British Museum, etc., etc. So I had to put in each heading where they were from. But standardizing and homogenizing these into a collection that people can understand is a lot more harder than you might think. So Unbounders took the decision to take the extra 3 months to be able to do that, so that people could find, that came after me, where the letters are.
And
But again, there was a lot of intrigue. I mean, I don't know. I mean, people were treating it as if it was the first time ever that there was a publishing delay on something. And again, there was too much interest given to this. It's like, guys, it's straightforward. It's so that the people that come after me, if they suddenly decide I want to go and find that letter, they'll know where it is, and that's all it was. No mystery.
are they are there any annotations sort of to the letters where he refers to someone, like possibly by a
Yes. Yeah.
uh, yeah.
And you
Okay.
see, that was where I came in. For a start, James's letters were mind-numbingly, terribly written, in the fact that his handwriting, good luck to anybody who can decipher that scrawl. It took me a long time, because I had to decipher the scrawl, and then as I was going through each letter, I not only transcribed each letter meticulously to the best of my ability, because again, I only had a deadline on this. I had 10 months was I was allowed. And not just that, I had to take each letter, and then what I would do, if James referred to something, I would then put a footnote underneath and explain to anybody who was reading the letter what he'd referred to here, because it's not straightforward. So yes, I've included all the footnotes and the explanation under each letter for anybody who might be curious about something.
Yeah, no, I love that stuff. So I'm glad to hear that. I'm very glad.
Oh yeah,
I'm
yeah,
so glad to hear that.
and I'm telling you guys, I'm telling you, Sean, you are going to love it, because I had the privilege, apart from being a starving artist living in a garret when I did those letters. I was the typical romanticist type starving artist when I did those letters. And as I was doing each one, my eyes were doing this. What? No, bloody hell. I was thinking, the guys who read these letters are going to have popcorn moments. They're going to be chucking the popcorn metaphorically over their heads, going, he wrote to William Morris. Oh my God. And
that's what I want to know, is who was he writing? Did he write you mentioned William Morris. Did he write to other horror? Because obviously at the beginning, but once the book became the first antiquary book was published, he became, in a way, celebrity in the horror sort of genre.
Yeah.
And did he actually correspond with other horror writers?
You'll have to wait and see.
Okay.
Because I can't give too much away. I
okay.
mean, perhaps.
But did he? I'm not asking, I guess, then. I'm not expecting then at this point who, but did he? Okay. Pass on that one then.
Wait till February. It's like they would say, "Girl, you wait till February." Sorry.
Okay.
Couldn't resist it.
You're teasing me here. That's sweet.
Oh yeah.
Well, let's go on to. Did he discuss okay, well, this is another one. Did he discuss works in progress in his letters? Or I guess if you can't say it with letters, did he discuss with people even before he published in the Chit Chat Club? Did he speak to friends of works in progress and and he's working out this story, or did he keep it all internally until the night it was read?
Okay. I'm trying to think how I would
subvert it from the letters then.
Okay. How would I describe M.R. James's letters? Has anybody watched the reality series, the Entourage?
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it myself.
Okay. All I will say is watch the series, the Entourage.
Okay. Are you able to answer that? Did he discuss not in the letters? Then okay, we're divorcing from the letters. But when
Okay.
he's writing the to friends in
I'm
progress.
just. This is what I'm saying. I'm putting a postmodernist twist on it. I'm just trying to remember who is the actor who did the Entourage. Oh God, it's when it's gone out of your head.
I got my phone here. Let's
look it up. Yeah, because when I was watching the Entourage, I thought to myself, "My God, this is James and his friends." You wouldn't believe it. It is like the Victorian up to modernism era of the Entourage. It's James and his friends and everything they got up to, and how his friends were extremely important to him.
Okay. Well, here's names: Adrian Grenier, Kevin Connolly, Kevin Dillon.
Yeah, I'm trying. It's terrible. I'm trying to remember which actor it was.
Mark Wahlberg.
Sorry?
Mark Wahlberg.
That's it.
That's the only name that I recognize.
It's basically James is Mark Wahlberg.
Okay, I'm gonna have to now take a look at that.
Yeah, James is Mark Wahlberg, and his friends are the Entourage. It is. His letters are so full of the things they got up to, things that they did, and it is this little enclave of a boys' club. But as well as that, we have James's inner world, and it's so fascinating. Okay. People are going to kill me now for saying that James was Mark Wahlberg, aren't they? I'm going to be roasted. I'm going to be roasted alive.
Well, there might be some interesting because I've not seen the series. There could be some interesting comments on the video as it gets viewed. Okay, now the one thing about that, you saying like no letters. What about that one? Because I have it, and it's got a weird. I should have. I didn't even think of trying to find it. It's something letters from my friend or something.
Oh yeah. Letters.
I one with an inscription that's dated. Yeah. That could be. It has a reference that could be somebody who was actually in contact with James, but but that's either
that's the letters to a friend. That's Gwendolyn McBride. It's James's, another one of James's friends, who decided to publish her letters to, and the letters that she received from James. So it's a good book. And I enjoyed reading it. But I thought to myself, it was just one particular amount of letters. And I thought to myself, it's about time that other letters were published. So I thought to myself, right, I'll get on with publishing some of the letters. And to be fair, I'm hoping, I don't know whether I'll ever revisit it again because, getting funding in this country. I mean, even when my book's published, the royalties in this country it's like we've got to this stage now, like artists who record records and anybody who, I mean, you're a content creator, Sean, you'll know yourself how hard it is to create anything and be paid to do it. I mean, I would absolutely love now to be funded to do James's notebooks and diaries.
Yes.
Because they're the natural companion piece to the letters. But I will say that working and running a house and having a life and trying to find time when you're so tired to actually do your own research and then crowdfund on top of it. I don't know if I don't know if I could ever do that again. It was exhausting. And
Yeah.
I'm afraid that unless somebody takes pity and decides to fund me to hello guys, begging Paul, fund me to do James's diaries and letters, when you haven't got the bank of mum and dad and you're not paid to do your own research, as you know yourself. I mean, this YouTube today has come from your generosity, Sean. And thank you ever so much for taking the time to do this for us. Because has anybody ever thanked you for taking your time and your efforts and the fact that, your health isn't great, but you've done this for people?
I do get thanks, and it's very nice to get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is time consuming, but I am lucky in that sense. I have lots of time to do it now. Um,
Yeah.
and I remember sending you a message on Twitter after, like, I think I said something about the diaries, saying the next thing is for you to do diaries and a biography.
Oh, well,
But
to
somebody
be
else,
fair,
yeah,
there's Dr. Darryl Jones of
yeah.
Dublin University, Queen's University, sorry, of Dublin. He's doing the most fantastic biography, so I am not touching that with a barge pole. But the diaries and the diaries and the notebooks, I'd love to do them, but again,
Well,
crowdfunding and actually having no money to do this. And even when I was doing the letters, I thought to myself, why am I sitting here starving to do this? I need my bumps feeling. I must be nuts.
well, the thing is, with James is so, like, this is the thing I don't understand, because he is so important in
Mm,
sort of horror genre and the ghosts, that why isn't there a comprehensive, a complete set of his diaries, his letters? Like, I mean, you're just
mm.
doing a collection here.
Yeah,
Where is the multi-volume complete, and then
because
later supplementary volumes as new ones are found in private hands?
the thing is, Sean, it's like now nobody can be bothered to pay anybody to do the work,
But the thing is, it just
and it
seems,
takes money.
yeah, but the thing is, like, you think a
Unfortunately.
publisher would see, yes, it's a niche market, but that niche market's pretty big. What
Mm.
what fan of M.R. James, there's not going to be too many that won't be interested in his letters
Well,
or his diaries.
the only trouble is, Sean, is like I haven't got an agent.
Yeah,
I
that's
haven't I haven't got an agent. I've done all this on my own money, and I was very, very lucky that Unbounders took a chance on me. But publishers are not interested in you unless you're a celebrity.
well. Hopefully, when this comes out, that will change, because, well, you've got a celebrity that's connected with the book to do the introduction
Oh,
as
Mark
well.
Gatiss.
And
Oh, he's so lovely. He's such a lovely, lovely soul. How did it come about? Oh God. It was really silly. I was on Twitter because you know how much I love Twitter.
yeah,
I'm chronically on Twitter. Because my cat will only have to do something slightly cute and she's on Twitter. You know, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but Mark Gatiss had done something, and I'd noticed that people kept saying, "Oh, Mark Gatiss, somebody has actually done the letters." And for a while, I was sort of, just tweeting stuff, and I made a joke saying, "Oh, if the god who is Mark Gatiss ever decides to follow me, then I can tell him about the diaries, the letters." So I suddenly got a follow from him, and I just went, "Oh my god!" And I put underneath, I just put hyphenated faints because I had fainted. Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So then on a February morning, I was having a really, really shit day. There was a mechanic outside kicking the tires of my car, which had just died. The cat had been sick over a pile of washing. I was outside cursing in the yard, jumping up and down because I was so frustrated and angry. And a tweet went off, and I'm thinking, oh my God, who is it now? Because I was having one of those days where you just want to hang yourself. And the tweet just said, oh, hi, it's Mark Gatiss. And I just went, and I just shouted to himself, my husband. I call him himself, having Irish roots. We always call our husbands himself. And I shouted up, Mark Gatiss has just tweeted me. And without missing a beat, because he's not impressed by anything, my husband, he just shouted, best answer it then, hadn't you?
And I assume you did.
Yeah, and all I will say is he is such a down-to-earth, lovely soul. He really is, because I was talking to him about the drawbacks of, trying to get anything funded in this country. And I said, I come from a village where you were either a minor or you married a minor. So, so I find all this sometimes I literally just pinch myself at the fact that I may not be funded, but even the fact that somebody like me gets to do this sort of stuff, well, I suppose that's something.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
You are welcome.
Jane Mainley-Piddock. And we'll stress the doctor all the time because you deserve it.
Thank you.
And I really thank you for taking the time to do this. And because I couldn't get any answers regarding specifics regarding the letters, after it's published, I have dibs on you again to talk about specifics in the letters.
I'll be happy. I will be happy to, Sean. I'll be happy to. And what I will do, I'll try and see if I can get your copy. I think I'm going to be, if I remember, Unbounders said something about me having to autograph all the copies. So my cat's going to be sitting there. I'm going to try to stop her being sick over the copies, because if somebody gets, one with cat sick on it, awfully sorry. Something that can be avoided.
Get the cat to then put a paw print so your cat signs it as well.
Like a medieval manuscript.
Artwork. Yes, artwork.
Yeah. I'll get you one with 3 cats with their paw prints on it on my my signature.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah. So anyway, thank you very much. Stick around for a minute because I do want to speak to you after we stop recording here for a few minutes. But yeah, and we will see you next time, we will once the book is out, and possibly before then. And that's what I want to speak to you about. But
anytime, Sean. You're a gentleman.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. BookTube. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.